According to a comprehensive new report by the World Bank, central banks across the world may be on the verge of a global recession in 2023, with a string of financial crises affecting emerging markets and developing economies that would have lasting consequences. This year, central banks around the world have raised interest rates with a degree of synchronicity unprecedented in the past 5 decades. This trend is expected to continue next year as well. Yet the currently expected trajectory of interest rate increases and other policy actions may not be sufficient to bring global inflation back down to levels seen before the pandemic. Investors expect central banks to raise global monetary policy rates to almost 4% through 2023, an increase of more than 2 percentage points over their 2021 average. A study finds that the global core inflation rate, excluding energy, could be more than double the 5-year average before the pandemic in 2023 if supply disruptions and labor market pressures do not subside. According to the report's model, central banks may need to increase interest rates by 2 percentage points in order to reduce global inflation to their targets. A global recession would be defined as a 0.4% contraction in per capita terms if this were coupled with financial market stress in 2023. Global growth is slowing sharply, with further slowing likely as more countries fall into recession. My deep concern is that these trends will persist, with long-lasting consequences that are devastating for people in emerging markets and developing economies, said World Bank Group President David Malpass. To achieve low inflation rates, currency stability, and faster growth, policymakers could shift their focus from reducing consumption to boosting production. Policies should seek to generate additional investment and improve productivity and capital allocation, which are critical for growth and poverty reduction. There are several historical indicators that indicate a global recession is already flashing warnings. Central banks are facing unusually fraught conditions today as they fight inflation. There is now an economic slowdown that is the steepest it has ever experienced after a global recession. Global consumer confidence has already fallen much sharper than it has in previous global recessions. A moderate hit to the global economy over the next year could tip it into recession, considering that 3 of the world's largest economies have been slowing sharply. Based on insights from previous global recessions, the study analyzes recent economic activity and present scenarios for 2022-24. A slowdown, such as the one now underway, typically calls for a counter-cyclical policy to support activity. While the global economy slows sharply, policymakers are withdrawing policy support due to inflation and limited fiscal space. It is clear from the experience of the 1970s, the policy responses to the 1975 global recession, the subsequent stagflation period, and the global recession of 1982 that it is possible to allow inflation to remain elevated for a long period of time when growth is weak. Over the past 5 decades, the 1982 global recession coincided with the second lowest growth rate in developing economies. Over 40 debt crises followed, and developing economies lost growth for more than a decade. Recent tightening of monetary and fiscal policies will likely prove helpful in reducing inflation, said Ihan Koz, the World Bank's acting vice president for equitable growth, finance, and institutions. But because they are highly synchronous across countries, they could be mutually compounding in tightening financial conditions and steepening the global growth slowdown. Policymakers in emerging market and developing economies need to stand ready to manage the potential spillovers from globally synchronous tightening of policies. A variety of policymakers will need to work together to control inflation without touching off a recession, according to the study. Policy decisions must be communicated clearly by central banks while maintaining their independence. Keeping cross-border spillover effects in the mind of monetary tightening in advanced economies can help anchor inflation expectations and reduce the degree of tightening necessary. Emerging market and developing economies should strengthen macro-prudential regulations and build foreign exchange reserves. To ensure consistency with monetary policy objectives, fiscal authorities must carefully calibrate the withdrawal of financial support measures. A high level of fiscal tightening is expected next year in countries that tighten fiscal policies. This could amplify the effects of monetary policy on growth. Policymakers should also develop credible medium-term fiscal plans and provide targeted relief to vulnerable households. Taking strong measures to boost global supply will be necessary for other policymakers to join in the fight against inflation. Among them are: labor market policies can facilitate the reallocation of displaced workers by increasing labor force participation and reducing price pressures. Increasing the supply of commodities globally. Global coordination can go a long way toward increasing food and energy supplies. In order to reduce energy consumption, policymakers should accelerate the transition to low-carbon energy sources. In order to alleviate global supply bottlenecks, policymakers should work together to support a rules-based order based on international economic rules rather than allowing protectionism and fragmentation to disrupt trade networks further.